and how to do them cleanly and without hassle and all that. So I think the best thing to do is to kind of go through, touch off everything, touch off the absolute basics quickly, and then work our way up to kind of methodologies and how to actually approach a task or a problem like that. Is that cool?
Yeah, all good. Sounds great.
Spot on. So
we are recording this, just so as somebody kindly reminded me, for posterity. So obviously,
excellent.
We take out anything libelous before we put it out to the public world.
Bear with me now. I have a kind of a plan of action here.
Oh my God, you do.
Oh no, there we go.
Wow.
See, I have a table.
Fantastic, just like that. Men's shed style. Need a table, there's a table.
Right, so in essence, talking about paint. Paint goes into two buckets. Now, like anything, there's always going to be contradictions to the rule, okay? Like holly is a hardwood tree, and it shouldn't be because it's evergreen. There's always contradictions to the rule, okay? But as a general rule, paints fit into one of two tubs. It's either water-based or oil-based. Now, oil-based, very, very simply, oil-based is a tough paint. Water-based is not a tough paint. Water-based is cheap, easy way of doing a big space. Oil-based is much more, it's more expensive, it's more difficult to put on, and also it's a lot of different things to it. So basically, your water-based paint is the paint you put on your walls, your ceilings, stuff like that. Your oil-based paints are the ones you put on your front doors, on your windowsill, or not windowsills, window ledges, window frames, things like that. It protects from the weather. It doesn't crack, it doesn't peel, it doesn't stain. So a lot of good things about it. But as I said, it's an equally awkward thing to put on. It's an awkward paint to put on. So you have water-based and oil-based. Then you have internal and external. Now, internal, again, that's what you go down to Woodies in the big aisle. You see the big buckets of cheap paint, that's for indoors. The more expensive paint then for water-based would be the external paints. Now, I'll talk to you in a while about which ones I kind of recommend. Again, from trial and error, I have always my go-tos. But basically, again, just to repeat, oil-based is a tough paint, water-based is a weak paint. Okay. Now, if you are buying water-based paint for the inside, I honestly wouldn't be going to the expensive paints in any way, shape, or form. You can get stuff made by Fleetwood, you can get stuff made by Woodies. It's all good. It all does the job. I wouldn't pay extra for an interior paint, but I would pay extra for an exterior paint. And the only one that I would recommend for outside is Colour Trend, right? So if you are painting outside, it's the one thing I will say. Indoors, who cares? You know, gloss, anything, doesn't matter really. But with external, it's Colour Trend is the only one in town. Dulex is grand, Fleetwood is grand. They're grand, but this, you just, for an extra 20 quid, you get a really, really good, easy to work with paint. And I wouldn't go anywhere if I was going outside if I didn't have Colour Trend. So that's my plug out of the way, even though Colour Trend aren't paying me. Right. So then you have then, okay, so your oil and your water base. Sometimes occasionally you'll find yourself spraying as well. Now, I got a big extension built there a few years ago, and I painted the whole thing on the inside in one day. I went to Aldi, paid 200 quid for a paint sprayer. You can rent them in some places, but they nearly cost you 100 quid a day. Went to Aldi, got my paint sprayer for 200 quid, and basically you get your normal emulsion paint, you put it in a bucket, you water it down a little bit, and there's a little gun with it, and you couldn't believe how easy it is to use. So if you happen to find yourself moving into an empty room that's just been freshly plastered, I couldn't think of an easier way of getting a good coat of paint. I would have broken my back, painted the whole thing by hand and by roller, whereas this thing did the whole thing in a day. Now, the disadvantage with that is, with spraying, is you have to mask things off. And there's a buddy of mine who's actually in the States, and he's a professional sprayer. And what they say is they go into a house, and if the job is taking 4 days, they spend 3 of them taping things off and 1 day painting. So there's quite a bit of prep, especially indoors, because whether you're covering floors or furniture or windows or doors or whatever you're covering, that takes time. However, the finish you get is incredible. Absolutely incredible. I was able to paint. I have no idea what the size, but very, very big, a lot of wall, a lot of ceiling, all in 1 day, and it only needed 1 coat. I didn't even have to go over it a second time. So if you are doing a large space, I highly, highly, highly recommend either go to Aldi and spend 200 quid in a sprayer sometime around, usually they come out in the spring, or rent one out for the day. They're hands down. Once you get them working and you get the flow of it, so easy. But another thing that you would really have to be conscious of when you're spraying, even with spray paints, and I'll talk about those in a second, is when you're spraying, you do not do zigzag. You don't go zoo, 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 because you'll get a huge buildup of paint on the sides where you're doubling back on yourself. So when you're spraying, you have to go zup, 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 and do it in lines, so you never get that spill on the sides. But again, it's a relatively new thing, but my God, I couldn't recommend spraying a wall highly enough. It's so quick, so easy, it's so clean once all the tapes are taken off. So that's kind of paints. Now, brushes, right. We always have a variety of different experience with using brushes and stuff like that. And when we think of a paintbrush, that's what we think of. We think of a flat top, okay, silicone, bristle, whatever, and cheapest chips. I always keep a stock of these in hand. I always have about 10 of these floating around in a box, always. Anytime I'm in deals or Mr. Price or something, they're fantastic for picking up cheap things like this. Like I think I got 5 of these for 150.
Wow.
You know, so I've about 15 of them always hanging around. But I use them for the crappy jobs. I use them for the stuff will take me a few minutes. My go-to is always get an angled brush, always. Now, my normal fella, as you can see here, his age, so I went and got a new one. But basically, that is what I paint with. It's a 2.5 inch angled brush made by Fleetwood. 6-7 quid. Brilliant, because you're not approaching the wall perpendicularly. You're at an angle. You're always at an angle to it, and it's an awful lot easier on your wrist, and it's an awful lot. You can be an awful lot more accurate because you can get into a corner much easier than you can do with your standard.
Yes. Yeah.
So by having that little angle, that little tip up there is valuable because you really can nuzzle your way into corners. So that's my old fella. As you can see, he's got a lot of wood there.
He owes you nothing.
2 inch, 2.5, and again, that's across the board. I also have a long handle version with a tip, and then really nice little fellas, the little edgers. Okay, again, small handle, again made by Fleetwood, but again with the little point. And this guy I'd use to get into, if I was doing skirting boards or things like that, to get really tight into the corner. Okay, so that's kind of brushes. And as I said, my go-to is go for a short handle, angle, 2.5 inch. You'd be your best friend. Really easy to use. And
I probably show my ignorance here. If you got a scissors to a cheap brush to put an angle on it, are you causing problems?
I wouldn't, because you are going to be causing problems, because you're going to be creating drag marks. No matter how good a hairdresser you are, and by the look of you, Frank, you're not that good.
I left nothing behind.
But basically, I would imagine you'd get all these streaks. I wouldn't do it. I'd go spend €6.
Point taken.
You know, like that's money saved.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the brushes are really for when you want to do a smaller area, because they're small. If you want to do a bigger area, you have to get rollers and so on. So with rollers, again, now I'm generalizing a bit, but generally there's only 3 different types of heads that you can get. Okay, so you have, one is a foam roller. Okay, so this is the same as a bath foam. That is used for oil-based paint. Now, I'll kind of get into why that now in a minute, okay? So the second one then is for a soft sheen. If you were painting a bathroom, or if you were painting kitchen cabinets, or where you wanted to put on a possibly water-based paint, but you wanted it to be nice and smooth and nice and clean. And for that, you get a short pile, where this is literally, it's very short little hairs. So it'll be very delicate with the paint. And then if you're doing a wall or a rougher area or something like that, then you have to use the long pile, you have to use the deep hairs, and that obviously the longer the hair, it can get into all the little nooks and crannies and stuff like that. Okay, so they're the main 3. Now, the one I want to talk about here for a second is about the oil-based one, right? The problem with oil is air. If you get air underneath the surface of the paint, the surface, like if you think about paint being laid on a surface, it dries from the surface down. So the top, it'll always create a sort of a skin first. And if you have air underneath that skin as it's drying, that air, or that skin will dry around the air bubble, and you'll end up with all these little pock marks of air. And that's what this is designed to stop, is the foam, to kind of eliminate as much as possible, to get the air completely out and push it out from the paint as you're laying it down. That's not as important with this. Like if you think about the amount of air that's being generated, when you're rolling this, you're constantly pushing air into the paint. But the fact that it's water-based, it'll come to the surface and just
breathe. Yeah.
But again, the way you paint, and I'll kind of address that afterwards at the end, the way that you actually approach your painting is very important as to what finish you get. And again, I'll address that later on. And then with the deep pile, this fella then would be used for, as I said, for rough plastered wall or anything like that. He could be used for, because he can get into the surface. And you're not worried about air bubbles with a sort of, well, you're not worried. You're less concerned about air bubbles with a rougher surface.
Yeah.
Okay, now the other thing that I think is very, very overlooked when it comes to paint is how you get it from the pot to the wherever you want to get it to. So you're not going to be picking up a tin of paint and dipping this into it and putting it on your wall. You're going to make an absolute mess. Now, I was brought up using these things, okay? Paint trays, right? We've seen them 1,000 million times. I don't go near them anymore. I think if you think about it, if we all collectively wrote down how many times we've had an accident with one of these things, whether we kicked it or bumped off it, there's a bit of paint spilling over. They're useless, absolutely useless. I use them now if I'm like, I don't really use them anymore. What I did now, and what I went into the hardware store the last day, and I actually found something I've been looking for an awful long time, and I would like to show you that. So Fleetwood, again, I'm not getting paid for this, but Fleetwood really seem to have gotten their act together. I saw this the last day and I was intrigued, and I spent, what's the point of it and whatever, and why is it shaped like that? Love it though. Haven't used it yet, but I love it. So what they have is on the inside, they have an angled roll on the inside.
Very good.
So you can throw your paint into that. You can use your roller. You're not, it's all handy that way. But then, lovely, you can leave your roller in there, put your lid on it, and come back and finish the job the next day or whatever you want. It's just a nice, simple little solution. And the fact that this is angled on the inside, like you can see lots of paint buckets like this, but they have we'll say that you roll the paint off the inside, the vertical face. And I never like that as an idea, because it's very easy to put too much pressure on and the bucket tips. Whereas this eliminates that problem by having the slope going down into it. You can see it there.
Yeah, very clever. Yeah.
Really clever and very cheap. I think that was like 8 or 9 quid. Like
that's good.
That's your one stop, and it comes with liners. And it even then comes with liners. There's a pack of 5 of them here. So
yes,
put the liner in, use it for whatever, and then chuck the liner in the bin and you're done. And you haven't put paint on anything. Everything is still spotless.
Fantastic.
The other one that I saw that I really like is this guy. Again, Fleetwood. And what you have here is you have just a little paint tub.
Okay? Oh, that's nice, yeah.
No, I love this, because think about it. You can hook that onto a ladder.
Yeah.
You can hook it onto a step ladder and it's keeping its way. If you're painting with a brush, the brush can go there.
Ah, yes.
Just, you're not keeping it in there, getting the handle of it all messy and painty and everything. You're just simple as dimples. And again, that comes with liners. So again, a pack of 5 of them here. You replace them as you want them, if you want to. I probably won't even use liners, to be honest with you. I just bought them free. But basically, really handy. So that's 2 more to my collection. And as I said, Fleetwood really seems to have gotten their act together with this. And it comes with a little lid that you can leave it overnight and come back and finish the job the next day or whatever. It gives you options.
Powerful. Yeah, no.
It's just a problem solver, And then obviously you are going up to, if you're doing a bigger job, like it's always that little pot there that I showed you. I'd probably use that for if I was doing a wall. If I was doing a big ceiling or something, I do like big wide trays, and I'd get one big massive one.
Good job.
Good thing about him is you get the big roller. Here's my big roller. So you have your 7-inch or your 9-inch, and having a nice wide surface here, especially if you're doing ceiling, because you have a long handle with it, and it's just easy to have a nice big wide strong. See the way this is angled at the corners. If you kick that, it's not gonna be tipping over and paint going all over the place. So I'd always have one big massive bucket like this, nice and flat, for mainly ceilings.
Yeah.
And if you are being coerced into painting the house and you're going to be doing a lot of it, okay, again, go into Deals and get yourself a paint stirrer. You throw it on a drill and that paint will be like butter going on the wall. It does make a difference. If you just open up a tin of paint and you start dipping your brush or your roller in straight away without mixing it up properly, it's like anything. Cake tastes better when the batter is well mixed, you know, and it makes it easier to use. So that kind of really is the brushes and the rollers and all kind of to do with them. If anybody has any questions, by the way, please again let Frank know when he can ask me.
Yeah.
And
Paul Holton just asks about cleaning brushes.
I'll get to the end.
All right, perfect.
Well, I've a bit sort of prepped for that at the end, and I do have a couple of nice tricks for you.
Great.
I haven't gotten to my good tricks yet. My good tricks will be coming. Right. So now I want to talk, I suppose, now a little bit about filling and caulking. Right. Filling's easy. Filling's grand. So filling is very simply clay with water in it. Special clay, but clay. So it's just basically a powder with water in it. And what you use it for is you use it for filling. If you had a nail in the wall or whatever, you wouldn't use it for a flexible joint, and that'll be the next kind of part. But it's for a dry, brittle, safe area, like a middle of a wall, something like that. A bit of filler is all you need. Now, I always have a tub of it, okay? But I really got to say, I really like this guy as well. Again, inside in the hardware store, a couple of quid. This stays forever and a day. These are a nightmare to keep wet. Anytime I finish using my filler, anytime I finish, I'll always go to the tap and throw in a few little bits of water and then seal it up again, just to try to keep the water in it, because it is a devil for drying out. So really try and keep them clipped properly and try and keep it as moist as you can. If it does go hard, you can still use it. You just have to put water in and mix the hell out of it, and it'll be nice and sloppy again. So if your filler goes hard, don't worry about it. That can be restored easily enough. Throw a bit of water into it. I like these guys because literally you unscrew the tip, get your filler back in again. It's an airtight seal and just a handy little thing. If you're filling holes in skirting boards and things like that, obviously you can get this stuff with pine or oak or whatever, so it'll fill the hole, because you don't want to go putting this on skirting boards if they're going to be varnished, because you'll be seeing little white heads everywhere. So yes, you can get the filler to correspond with whatever wood you're doing. So if you're in a position where you're painting, that'll do. But if it's pine, get the pine. If it's oak, get the oak, and just fill them in. And have a good little flat edge as well. Again, filling, the one thing, and I've been teaching woodwork for years, and what I always say to people is, and what I'm always telling the kids is if you can feel it, you can see it. So if you are filling in a wall, a bad idea is to get your thumb, put the filler in it, and basically squish it into the hole with your thumb. Because what you're doing in effect is, and it's a funny time, like the amount of times you put filler on a wall and you dry, you paint it, next thing there's a little hole sunk into the wall, or it looks like it's been sucked in a little bit. That happens because it hasn't been dried out properly, or it was pushed in with a bubble of air underneath it that dried at a weird rate, and it creates that little concave curve, a little crevice curve. You really have to use a filler knife. And how I would approach a filler knife, if you can imagine a hole here, I would have my filler on the knife. I would go to the middle of the hole, scrape left, go to the middle of the hole, scrape right. So you're constantly working out from the middle of that hole. And then you have to sand it afterwards. If you don't sand it, you'll see it. Simple as that. And you have to sand it well. You have to sand it flush, or you'll see it. Because if you can feel it, you can see it. And honestly, it's not nice to see these patches on your wall where you haven't maybe done a great job filling. It's all to do with the sanding afterwards. You have to get it to the same level, and you have to sand it clean. And again, I'll be touching off sanding now in a few minutes with you as well. So for filling, holes, things like that in the middle of a wall. Clay filler, absolute, does the job, no problems with it. Now, caulk. Took me a long time to get the hang of caulk. It's a messy little devil, but it's such a good fella. He will make a wall look like $1 million because he takes care of the edges. He takes care of anywhere where two surfaces are meeting, two painted surfaces are meeting. Now, caulk is water-based, but it has some weird things in it that makes it like a sheen paint. It kind of has, it has, we'll say, characteristics of an oil-based material, but it's actually water-based. Now, how you best get caulk into a crevice, okay? Now, a friend of mine from Canada taught me this years ago, and I have to say I have used it ever since. Now, you remember the last time I was on, Frank?
Yeah.
You remember I was talking about a traffic cone?
Yes.
And you all but accused me of stealing that traffic cone.
I did not.
Yeah.
Borrowing.
I'm going to get back to that and use the remainder of that traffic cone to show you how to cut the tip of your caulk gun, okay? Really, really simple. You take a slice off the top like you should, okay? Something about a 30-degree angle, 45, 30 degrees, anywhere around there, you're good. Don't make it too pointy, but also don't make it too square. You need to 40, 45-ish degrees, okay? But the tip, the really, really important bit then, is you go to the tip of it again with your knife, take off a little notch like that.
Ah, very good,
okay?
yes.
So when you are caulking, you can see there what's happening yourself. As you're pushing it out, you're leaving a trail of caulk in that shape.
Yeah.
Because it eliminates so many little problems with build up and everything like that.
Yeah.
Because you're doing two things at one time. You're moving and you're squeezing.
Yes.
And trying to get that dance properly and trying to get that dance right is bloody tricky.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that is a game changer.
That's an absolute game changer. I can see that.
Take that extra couple of little seconds, get your knife and go tick, tick, create a little V up at the tip, and it just gives that caulk an escape.
The flow, yeah. Beautiful, lovely trick.
And the second most important thing about caulking, and the thing that is vastly underrated, and I did it for years and years and years, and I would never now go caulking without having a jug of water and a cloth, right? You have to have the jug of water because as you plop, 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 as you get your caulk line in, dip your finger into the water and you constantly keep your finger wet. That saves so much unnecessary spludges and blodges and bits and pieces getting everywhere. And again, caulk being the funny ingredient that it is, it dries in a funny way. It takes a few hours to dry rather than filler takes half an hour, but caulk takes a couple of hours because of that characteristics of an oil-based material. It takes longer to dry and it's almost rubbery. But just water at the start. Have water. If you get a glob, you get your cloth, you dip it in and you clean. So you clean as you go. You don't go back to the couple of hours later with a bit of sandpaper because it doesn't sand like a wall. It doesn't sand like filler. It doesn't sand because of that kind of oil characteristics that it has. So I wouldn't sand caulk.
Yes.
I'd only sand filler. Caulk, you get it right. You get it right as you're putting it on. And then you let it go, and the next time you'll be seeing it is when you're painting it. Gotcha. So, and that's where water, always have a jug of water and a clean cloth beside you. I couldn't find a clean cloth. It's the development of a workshop, isn't it?
That's allowed, yeah.
But so the two go-tos when it comes to caulking, because caulking really can be a pain in the butt, is cut your gun proper, and secondly, have your water with you. You have to have your water beside you. Have to.
Yeah.
Okay, so filling in caulking. Now, what are we on about? Right, stain bleed. Stain bleed now. So there's two types of, we'll say, main stains that come through. One would be damp, and one would be knots in wood and skirting board and things like that. So they both are you can kind of attack the two of them in different ways, and I would recommend that you do. Some people say, and I don't, but some people say put 2 coats of undercoat on it and you're grand. So people will go around to the knots in their skirting boards and put a dab of undercoat, and then they come along and they undercoat the whole skirting board the next day or whatever, and then every knot has had 2 coats of undercoat. I've seen that fail, so I don't do that anymore. If I have knots, I use knotting. Knotting, small little jar, okay, tiny brush, it's very watery, and you just simply get a small brush into it and dab, 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 dab. So you dab all the knots, and what that stops is, that stops the bleed. Because knots, if you imagine what a knot is a very, very young tree. It's full of energy, because it's basically, it's a branch, and it's full of energy, and it's full of sugars. So it will bleed, because it's a concentrated spot of sugar, and it will bleed from all the sap inside in the wood. So the only way to really stop that I've seen is by using knotting. It is a pain in the butt in one way, because you've all this wall prepped, and now you're going along and you're dot, 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 dot. But it is worth it, because they don't come through. They don't. It's one of those unnecessary steps that it is very effective.
Yeah.
Now, if you have damp stains and things like that, stain block, it's your only man. I've been kind of lucky. We don't have many damp stains coming in our house. We had one. I dealt with it on the outside, and then I finished it on the inside. But yeah, we've had no issues. It just basically, it does what it says. You put it on a stain, make sure it's clean, and then you put this on, and then you paint over the whole thing. And that again has stuff in it that basically stops things coming through.
Gotcha.
Like the technology with paints, I have to say, has come along in leaps and bounds over the last 10 years. Even when I started kind of doing this stuff, oil-based paint was a nightmare, but it's so much easier now. I suppose I've gotten better at it, but at the same time, it's the way they're able to make things now is incredible. So stain block is the only fella that I would use for walls, and knotting for when you're painting wood. Cool?
Yeah.
Good.
Makes sense.
Right, wall prep. Okay. Right. Having this table up here is actually very handy.
It's a great, yeah.
Right, so wall prep. My go-to tool is these guys. Now, officially, these are sort of cleaners, but these are painter mates. I'd always have one of these in my pocket when I'm painting. I had him for years, but as you can see, I was Aldi. And Aldi, as you see him pick them up, that's a really handy thing, even just for opening a bottle of beer.
Yeah.
But, and it's bigger.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is my go-to guy when it comes to a wall. I would never paint a wall without at least rubbing the wall down and checking for lumps and bumps. You'd be amazed how things just seem to grow over the years, whether it's a flipping, whatever. Stains. There's always stuff. I would never just go to, I'm going to paint that wall today, move the couch, get the paintbrush and start at it. You have to prep the wall. It's like anything. A good foundation is a good finish.
Yeah.
So you rub down the wall. Any holes you fill with polyfiller, like I said, the clay-based filler, you fill it with that, sand it down afterwards. I'll talk about sandpaper in a second. And I'd always rub over the wall with this, just knocking off any high points, anything like that. And you'll see the high points. This is brilliant for knocking them off, lovely sharp edge on it. And then you fill the holes. So the wall is done. Now, once the wall is done, it would be, I think, remiss of you not to sand down that wall a little bit, just to give it a rub with sandpaper, because again, depending on the paint that was there beforehand, say you had a soft sheen or a sheen emulsion, something like that, you got to think that has chemicals in it. And by agitating that, by basically scraping along the surface, you're creating all these lovely little grip parts or grip points for when you put the next coat of paint on, that it'll stick on properly. Because paint, if you don't do that, if you think of over the years, the amount of nicotine stains you get on walls and things like that, and the amount of stuff coming off us and our environment, you can get a kind of almost like a semi-oily surface on the wall. And that's when paint delaminates and it cracks and it peels and it does all that stuff. And that's all due to not having it prepped properly. So the age-old thing is get sandpaper. Okay, now I do have an opinion here on sandpaper.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Few different types, okay? The ones I avoid are these, for walls especially, is paper sandpaper. There's with the paper back here, Okay, that's just paper with little grits of sand glued onto it.
Yeah.
I now stumbled upon this stuff where basically it's fabric backed. So this now won't tear. It won't rip like a sheet of paper. It's good and strong. It's like a piece of fabric with sandpaper with sand on it.
Yeah.
That's handy enough. Now, for those of you that might not know what sandpaper and how it's graded. So if you imagine how they grade sandpaper is, okay, this stuff here this is P60. Now, P60, what that means is for every square centimeter of sandpaper, there's 60 grains of sand there. But then if you go up here, we'll say to 120. Now you have, for every square centimeter, you have 120 grains of sand. So they're much, much smaller, they're much, much finer. So the lower the number, the rougher it is. The higher the number, the smoother it is. So you can get up to P1000, you can get up to P2000, where it's almost like rubbing a sheet of paper on it.
Yeah.
So the lower the number, the bigger the grit. And if you're doing a wall, P80, somewhere around there, P60 is a bit rough, P100 is probably a bit smooth. So I'd be about P80 and give it a sand. But what I have also recently, I was in France a few years ago and I picked this guy up. Now, what he has a mesh. So this is one of the sanding sheets from him. So it's basically a grid of metal that has all the sand on that. And it's brilliant because it doesn't clog. So as you're sanding, you just bang it and it's clean and off you go again. It doesn't get clogged up like normal sandpaper. Really, 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 really handy. Lovely. I use it sparingly because I like using it so much. That kind of makes sense. The mesh ones, they're becoming more and more and more popular now, and they're becoming more readily available as well. So that's kind of about your wall prep. And you're caulking around your architraves and your skirting boards and everything like that, filling all your holes. And I suppose now it's about the paint and the paint application and how I would recommend you approach a wall. So if you imagine a wall as a rectangle, you go along the top with a small brush. That is your him. You go along the top, you just create a band of white up into the ceiling, dabbing it whatever way you want to do it. You do the top first, then you do it on the sides, then you do across the floor. Then you do the top third of the wall, then you do the bottom third of the wall, and then you do the middle third last.
Yes.
That's always how I've approached the wall. You get down from upstairs first. So basically do the ladder work first, get out of the way, then hurt your knees for a while, and then basically you do the middle bit, the easy bit at the end. And what I've always said when it comes to painting as well, so you put your paint on, and it's very, very, very important after your paint has been on a while that I always give it another rub, always, but very, very lightly. So if you imagine, if I was painting this as a wall, and if you imagine this is the top and this is the bottom, first thing I'm going to do is get my brush, get up on my ladder, do it 2 inches all the way around, work out all my edges first. Then I get my roller and I get up on the ladder and I do the top third. I do the bottom third down on my knees, and then I do the middle. And then I'll always come back at the end, literally holding my roller with 2 fingers. I'm not using force here. And I rub over every single bit of the thing all over again. And that really does, it just, everything is nice and wet at the same time. And it just dries nicely, and it's a much, 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 much nicer finish. Again, personally, it's always the way I've approached it. Do up, do down, do the middle, but always first do the edge. And you work your way in. And
is that final, the whole wall, that's straight after you finish the middle piece?
Yeah, pretty much, because you have a lovely band in the middle of lovely, fresh, wet paint, and you're just spreading that out now. And it really is all about trying to get it's all nice when it's all wet at the same time, and it can all dry at the same time. Yeah. It ends. Yeah,
but it's straight after cup of tea, and then
straight away afterwards. I would, absolutely.
Right.
Now, if you're doing oil-based paint, and again, by the way, sorry, floor coverings. Okay, if you're not, I rarely use floor coverings much to my own detriment. But I would try to, especially with carpet, I'll always use floor coverings. Sometimes not with the wooden floor because you can wipe it. But if I'm using oil-based paint, for the love of God, use drop cloths, for God's sake, because oil-based paint, if oil-based paint even touches off carpet, it's soaked in, and it's flipping impossible to get out. And you don't want to go attacking it with white spirits. You know what I mean? You don't want to be putting that on your floor or on your carpet or whatever. And sorry, actually, that's something I should have mentioned, is for an oil-based paint, you when you have finished with the brush or whatever, you do not put that in the sink to wash it out, because oil and water does not mix. So you have to use white spirits or methylated spirits to basically clean out that brush, which is what I'll be talking about now in a second. Okay, so all good with that?
Yeah, one question. What's the name of the French sanding again?
Yeah.
S'il vous plaît.
No problem. Okay, Wolfcraft. I'll see if there's a code number or something on this. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll put this up here so at least I'll call it out to you. I'm seeing 8722000. That's the only
8722000. And what was their name again?
Wolfcraft. WOLFCRAFT. I know they're online because I have bought their stuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
So
perfect. Okay, it's gone up now on the chat anyway. If anyone wants to take it down, go into the chat function.
And the other thing about it too, and the other thing I like using this is it's really ergonomically nice. It's a lovely quality thing. There's a nice rubbery grip on it.
Yeah.
It isn't Aldi like. If you know what I mean. It's,
yeah. It's French.
Yeah. You know, the French, they like doing things properly, don't they? With a bit of flair. I suppose the last thing that I'll do with you now will be about cleanup and then maybe how to restore brushes and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so I think before I do the actual cleanup with you, I think I'd actually like to explain. I always have a kind of a process in my head. I remember the last time I was on with you, Frank, I said that I'm not an organized man, and I'm not an organized man. I'm a tidy man. I'm able to put things in places and then just I know they're there, but organized I'm not. But I do have a system with brushes that it just works very well for me, and I'll show you what I do.
Yeah.
So anytime we get Indian food, okay, I will always keep the metal trays. They are painting. They go into my painting bucket because I'll always have a few of them. Anytime we get Cully and Scully soup, I always keep the pots because these are very, very handy because they're a really good quality plastic. They have a lovely sharp lip on them and they have a lid.
Yeah.
So really handy for paints.
Brilliant.
And what I do then with my brushes is, okay, I always have a big stock of cheapy brushes. So if I'm painting, like again, I'm always painting stuff. So I couldn't do with one or two brushes. I'm always doing bits and pieces around the place. So I'll always have a spade of cheapy brushes. I use them once or twice, and then they go into the same bucket as them.
Yeah.
And then now these are my really crappy jobs. As in, if I'm putting, like the last day, I was putting hammerite on a gate that I was after buying, and I was hanging it up on the side of the house. Needed a couple of coats of black hammerite. There we go. Grab one of the really crappy brushes that's been used about 50 times.
Yeah.
And then get one of those trays, put my hammerite in. There we go. And that goes in the bin. So it works its way from a new brush to a kind of a crappy but ready to be destroyed brush with the tins and everything and into the bin with it. The Cully and Scully pots are brilliant. They're so handy, especially if you have a lot of paints going on or for mixing paints and stuff. I do quite a bit of mixing myself. I've mixed them in here, especially with oil-based paint, and clip the lid on. You could come back a year later and use it. It's really good way because that's a lovely tight seal that's on them. And more importantly, the plastic is lovely and strong, and it's a nice white seal.
Yeah.
So, I didn't expect to be talking about Cully and Scully soup tubs that much, but
no harm. It's good soup, no problem.
And the soup is rather nice as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Now, with cleaning a brush and cleaning up after yourself, which again is as annoyed as I am starting a job painting. It's more frustrating at the end when you're finished your job and then you have to clean up after yourself. And depending on how many accidents you've had and whatever, okay? So number one, drop cloth comes up, out, that's gone. That's the floor taken care of. Now, washing brushes and things like that, again, is just one of those things you just don't want to be doing because, you know, you've been painting and you're probably a bit cranky from painting. So white spirits cleans out your oil-based paint. So it's just a thinner basically. So what that will do is that will wash away, do it in the sink. Be careful, don't be getting it on your hands. Certainly don't be getting it into your eyes. It's nasty enough stuff, but it's fine, okay? It's no problem with it going down the sink. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst in the world. Don't use a lot of it either. But no, when it comes to actually a brush and keeping a brush and washing a brush afterwards, what I would always use is him. He's the trick. He's one of the main fellas, is literally just a normal fork. You can get paint thinning forks, brush thinning forks, but this guy is just as handy. What you do not want to be doing when you're cleaning out a brush, I've been guilty of it myself, but I have gotten out of the habit of it. One of the worst things you can do when you're cleaning out a brush is get your sink, fill it up a few inches, and just start slamming that brush down into it, trying to get all the paint out from inside it. All you're doing there is making those bristles go, yeah. You're just making the whole thing not good. So really, you'd be much more advised, you clean out your brush with the tap running on it, and you're brushing it underneath. Okay, so you're brushing that water, You're not upsetting the bristles. You come along then with your fork, and obviously enough, in she goes, and you're breaking that paint out from the inside so that you don't want paint drying in there because it's just going to start sticking bristles together. So you go like that a few times and then keep washing, and just do that a few times. That brush is clean. It's as clean as it will ever be.
Yeah.
You want to try to, you know what I mean, agitate the bristles and get them separated. And if you get a situation where you have a few bristles at the edge, I don't know if you can see, I have a few bristles.
I know that.
If you have that problem going on, do not pull them out. You get a scissors and you snip them. That you do not pull them out, because if you pull them out, all you're doing is making it easier for other bristles to fall out.
Right.
So anything, if you do have a couple of stray ones at the edge, you get your scissors or your knife and you just snip at them.
Give a snip, yeah.
But no, by no circumstances do you
don't start pulling them out. Yeah. Brilliant.
And then I suppose one of the things that I would be doing quite a lot as well, and it's a really, really handy way of keeping stuff. So say for argument's sake, at the moment, I'm painting doors in our hallway. That's not a one-day job. If you do a door in an afternoon, you do another door the next day, whatever. You do it for a few days. And I'm painting them with oil-based paint. Now, I don't want to be painting a door, coming along, washing out the brush, coming along the next day, taking out a brush, starting the whole thing again and washing each time. The best thing to keep there or to have there is a roll of cling film, and you basically roll it around your wet brush when you're finished with it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you can come along the next day or the day after or the day after or even the day after or even the day after.
Yeah.
Take off the cling film and off you go again. Everything's been washed. But the one thing I would say to you about if you are going to do that, okay, so when I'm putting the cling film on, and you can put an elastic band around it as well, just for extra sake if you want to. Now, say I have a brush here now, and if I'm putting it on, what I will always do is get my brush and dip it into whatever paint I was using. Okay, load up that brush.
Yeah.
Not slopping or falling, you know, but like a nice bit of paint on there. And then when you wrap him, make sure you push the air out before you sort of tie him up.
Yes.
Inside here, there's no air. It's only because air is what cures paint.
Yeah.
So it's only wet paint that it's surrounded by. That'll be perfectly grand. You'd be there for a week, no problem. You come along, take the tape off, and off you go again, like it was a brand new fresh brush.
Brilliant.
So that's a really, really handy way of saving effort and time.
Yeah, great tip. Yeah.
Cool. And then with brush restoration, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't do it very often. I suppose in my father's day, he would have been restoring brushes because brushes were expensive and they were, in fairness, they weren't in plentiful supply. But if you can go into Mr. Price or Deals or whatever like that and get 5 brushes for $150, you know, restoring brushes isn't as much of a skill as it used to be. But obviously there's 2 ways of doing it, okay?
Yeah.
I do have a brush restorer Okay, but if I didn't have this vinegar, if you have an old brush, leave it soak in a tub of vinegar for a night, and get your fork and start working it out, and you will restore it. Vinegar is that's mostly vinegar.
Malt vinegar.
Mostly, vinegar. Vinegar is unreal. I do 100 things with vinegar. Well, no, I don't. More like 70, 75. Sorry.
Chips included, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But vinegar is brilliant at cleaning, and it's organic, it's natural, it's kind of there's no chemicals in it, it's just vinegar.
Right, very good,
yeah. So that, in fairness, the one thing I didn't mention, sorry.
That's all.
Right. Masking tapes.
Yeah.
Right. Up until 5 years ago, we knew one color masking tape, and it was that fella, the beige fella, right?
Yeah.
And I presume we've all had our experiences with masking tape where you've gone to the trouble of taping it off. You did your paint, you took off your masking tape, and you ripped the paint off, whatever you had it stuck on, and you had plenty of bleed sleeping in underneath the masking tape. We've all had those experiences. The beige stuff, that's about 5 years old. I haven't touched it. Yellow and blue. Now, there's green, yellow, and blue. They're the three main colors of masking tape.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's again, things are advancing technologically so incredibly well. Like what you're able to do now, like I'll explain it in a second, but the roundabout way. The blue is your done stores, all right? It's your general, it's everywhere. You can kind of use it everywhere. It has a fairly high tack. Now, that means if you put that on paint that is fresh or hasn't cured properly or anything like that, if there is any weakness underneath it, this will take it off. Okay, it has a higher tack. But if you imagine if you were painting a wall, and if you did want to put masking tape on your skirting boards or whatever, your skirting boards are probably going to have an oil-based paint. So that's not going to take off an oil-based paint. It'll interfere with water-based paints, but this will not touch an oil-based paint. It'll perfect line, perfect seal. Okay.
Yeah.
If you are painting, if you do need to mask a part of a wall or where there is a water-based paint underneath it, okay, you have yellow. And yellow then is there's less tack in yellow than there is in the blue.
Yes.
Now, again, depending on what you're doing, I'll be honest with you, I don't use masking tape all that much. I do quite a bit of spray painting here, and that's what I use the masking tape for. But when I'm painting inside, I very, very rarely use masking tape. I'm kind of able to work lines. But if you're putting that on a wall, you have to press it down well before you paint. You really have to press in the edges to stop bleed. But it comes off no problem, and it won't damage any wall or anything like that underneath it. But where this is mainly used would be if you were spray painting metal or if you were spray painting car bodies and things like that. It's low tack, it won't leave any residue behind it. But if it's on a roughish surface, it's not great for sticking.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What you do have now, though, is, and that's the same with green. Green and yellow are very, very similar.
Right.
What they have now, what they've developed now, which is a brilliant thing, and you've all heard of frog tape, I hope.
I have. I used it recently. Yeah.
There you go. No, frog tape, and why frog tape is so bloody good and why it's so effective is because they have a chemical agent in the actual adhesive that when that comes in contact with liquid, with the water or an oil, it basically creates an impenetrable barrier. So I don't know how it happens. I'm not a science teacher, but basically, as soon as it comes in contact with water or oil, it puts up the doors, it puts up the gates, and it doesn't let anything underneath it. It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah,
brilliant.
I have to say, I was very happy. It was the first time I used it. I'm very happy with it. Yeah.
I've used it a few times. A bit more expensive though, but it
is
one of those things that it does its job well. It's like color trend paint. It's worth the extra 20 quid. I wouldn't be an idiot and go off and buy Farrow & Ball, like these fancy paints you'd find in Brown Thomas.
My wife.
I'm sorry, 150 quid for a 5 litre tin. Good luck. No, keep it please. But if you're doing the outside of the house, I really do recommend color trend paint. It just looks so much nicer.
One question on color trend was asked. Where do you get it? Is it available nationwide, as the fella said, or almost?
No, it wouldn't be. Color Trend, I'm actually not sure. Is Color Trend by Dulux, by Axo Nobel? I'm not 100% sure, but
it's all one word. Color Trend. Yeah.
in our local hardware store, they have it. They have it in Woody's. They have it in B&Q. But it just, again, it's just lovely, and it goes on like silk.
Yeah.
That's the thing I really like about it. It as it paint, it behaves itself so well.
Yeah.
I suppose the other thing that I could very quickly talk about there too about external paint is I have Pebble Dash on the old part of my house.
Oh yeah, the dreaded Pebble Dash.
Pebble Dash, I know, yeah. But there's two ways that you can attack Pebble Dash. Both of them are actually quite good, in fairness. Right, the first way is spraying. I sprayed one gable end of my house one year, and as you can imagine, a bit of prep work, but once you get it, fills it beautifully because it fills all the pebbles. There's no getting into it. There's no real deep crevices that you can't get into with spray. That's the first way. But if that isn't an option, if you can't spray the outside of your house, what you can do is you give it 2 coats, and you know you're going to give it 2 coats, and you water down the first coat a lot. So for the first coat, it's literally 50% paint, 50% water.
Yeah.
It goes on like slop. Like literally, it's like painting the wall with water.
Like whitewash almost.
But the beauty of it, exactly, it's almost like a whitewash. But the beauty of that is that gets everywhere.
Yeah.
You're
a base.
Of course, 8 flipping gets everywhere, and then you give it a second coat of paint, and you have a fresh looking Pebble Dash then.
Brilliant. I'm going to fly through a few questions if you don't mind.
No problem. I'll do my best.
Patrick Ryan asks, if you want to take paper off a dry lined wall, any tips for that?
Oh, okay. I would start by asking myself the question, number one, what's going up after it? If it's other wallpaper, don't take it down. Just paper over that paper. If you are painting it, okay, honestly, you steam it. Rent a steamer. Wallpaper, I have a few walls wallpapered, and I've actually painted on wallpaper rather than take it down, because it's like you are breaking an egg, and there has to come a place where you're kind of going, it's, you know, the amount of effort versus the result that you get for it. You have to balance that up. Again, I suppose number one, if you do have to take it down, buy a steamer, or not, sorry, buy a steamer, rent a steamer.
Yeah.
It's just a big pad. It's slow, steamy, but it comes off in a jiffy.
Old school, yeah.
It's your only option, unfortunately, or cover it.
Peter Kavanagh asks, tips for dried in masonry paint on aluminium windows. Any tips for that? Yes, I was thinking about that. You mentioned that to me a while ago, Frank. So it's masonry paint, which basically means it's water-based. Yeah. It is aluminium, which I presume has been either dip coated or it's some spray painted paint, whatever, on it. And I presume what you really don't want to happen is to go at that paint and for it to chip the paint of the door. I presume that's your paint you don't want to do. Okay. Okay. If I was approaching that, I probably would be of the school. Again, it's bang for buck. So let's look at it this way. Imagine you have your dirty paint line coming down, and you have your lovely clean door here, and you have your paint here. Yeah. What would be stopping you getting a roll of blue tape or a roll of yellow tape and creating a new line and painting it to that line? Yes. So rather than try to get rid of the problem you have, you're fixing the problem that you have. Yeah. Because when you're walking in and out the door, like I can't remember the last time I walked into a house and complimented somebody about the way their wall met their door. Like, oh, you've painted a little bit of your door. Do you know, it's It's a very, very simple solution to that problem. Is literally get your tape, put the line down. So if you have your wobbly line, get your line down and you just create a new line. Yeah. It's a clean edge. But if you did have to take it off, water-based paint at least has the advantage that it is brittle and it chips. And depending how much of it there is, if you did want to get a scalpel, and I know aluminium door and fresh paint and everything, I get it, but I think getting a chemical composition or something that could actually break down that paint so you could rub it off, I don't know of anything like that exists. Yeah. If there isn't much, you could pick it off. Or a sharp plastic edge, maybe. Just pick it off. Yeah. And just have hot water. Don't go near it with a Brillo pad or anything like that. Yeah. Or create a new straight line. Yeah. Very good. I've got one last question for you, sir, and I'm very conscious, and thank you for your time. Not at all.
Oh, this is one I mentioned to you earlier. Charles Horty asked, painting exterior walls using a roller. You covered that off with the rollers. Oh, he wants to know about covering windows, which you covered with the masking tapes.
Yeah.
The wooden sleepers in the garden already with the brown paint.
Yeah.
Could you recommend what black paint I should use to repaint?
No problem. Okay, so I'll go back there first to the thing about the external paint and painting an external wall. The other thing that I failed to mention was you can actually get very, very deep pile if you are painting pebble dash. It's very, very long hairs on a 7 or inch or a 9 inch roller.
Right.
You'd have to have that. You'd have to really, really deep one. Masking off windows and stuff, again, in your general hardware stores now, you're able to buy rolls of tacky film. So you can get ones that will stick onto carpet, you can get ones that will stick onto glass, and you can get ones that will stick onto PVC windows and all that stuff.
Right.
And it's almost like cling film, but it has a very, very light adhesive on it. So you can tape off your windows.
Excellent.
That'll be, and again, the cheapest strips, they've come down in price so much.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to the sleepers, and again, I've been thinking about that. So, like I said, if you have a sleeper, you have to think of how that sleeper has been treated already. It has been treated, it is basically being tarred or pre-soated or whatever. There's some preservative in that wood. Now, if you wanted it black, I'd ask the question, how black do you want it? Do you want it just very, very dark, or do you want it specifically black? If it's black you want, you'd have to paint it. And then you're putting paint onto something that has an oil-based preservative impregnated into it. And you're like, if you think of a piece of wood, think of the amount of places where water can gather on that piece of wood. And if you put paint on top of that, you're going to have delaminating and bubbles and all sorts of things like that. Because paint is almost like a finished surface. Whereas a sleeper to me says it's been tarred or it's been creosoted. So tar, but the only thing about tar is tar stinks and tar will stain things afterwards. Creosote doesn't really stain things afterwards. I personally, if it's in the garden, I'd avoid tar. I've seen it being done, and if it's a small thing over on the side of the garden, like a feature or whatever, no problem if people are going to be sitting on it or rubbing off it. But other than that, creosote is, and the more creosote you put on, the darker it's going to get.
Yeah, perfect. Ronan, you're a gentleman. Thank you very much. We're going to. This is the second in our series, shall we say? We look forward to talking to you possibly next month if it suits you.
No problem. If anybody has any ideas or sort of questions or ideas of something that I could cover with you, I'm more than happy to. And if I don't know, I'll learn, because that's what I like doing.
And fire them into me, and I'll forward them on to you for now.
And I can prep, because, like, in all fairness, I was coming on here today and I was going decorating. No, that's not a very exciting topic area.
You were brilliant. Those tips were fantastic.
I sit down at 3:30 on a Wednesday and watch some fella talking about painting for an hour. But at the same time, I hope I covered some areas with you.
You did.
Common sense.
Yeah, no, you shared some great knowledge. You really did.
Coola boola.
Listen, look after yourself.
Go on, check out my website, lads.
Keep an eye on the website, lads, and I'll be putting out more.
Creating. Think of procreating without the P.
Creating.
Good man.
Listen,
I'll get a sign up for the next one.
Do absolutely. We need to get some branding involved. Listen, Ronan, thank you very much. Slán go fóill.
And best of luck to all of you.
Slán.